It may be the Christmas season, but in one Colorado charter school, Islam is all the rage. I'm Dr. Duke, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Katie is not with us today. She's been kidnapped by a tribe of pygmies, and they have made her their queen. Today, we're looking at the real-life effects of bad education and equity promotion as the valedictorian of a Detroit high school says she's struggling to understand low-level math in college. Plus, it wouldn't be the holidays without millennials whining about something, and this time it happens to be Secret Santa being too stressful for them. But we start this Christmas season in Colorado, where a first grade class was asked to decorate Muslim prayer rugs for the Islamic holiday of Ramadan, with no, of course, mention of Christians or Christianity or the holiday season. Before we kick things off, this is the Christmas holiday, and try giving yourself a present, you and your family, the entire family, a present for this Christmas. How about food security? Could you feed yourself and your family for several weeks with the food you have at home? If not, it really is time to build an emergency food supply. I trust the people at My Patriot Supply, and you really ought to as well. A 2-week food kit gets you started. This week, save $70 for the holidays. $70 when you visit preparewithduke.com. That's preparewithduke.com. These kits include meals that last up to 25 years in storage and are guaranteed to arrive at your door in 2 days. What a great stocking stuffer. The idea of food security for your family in case of any emergency. Go to preparewithduke.com right now to save $70 on your order. Again, that's preparewithduke.com. All right, on to our first story. I'm joined today by our international correspondent, Alex Newman, and we're talking about Aurora, Colorado charter school. Now, charter schools are public schools, although there's a little bit more flexibility for parents. But an Aurora, Colorado charter school, in the weeks leading up to Christmas of this year, is having kids engage in all sorts of spiritual and Islamic activism. Talk a little bit about the situation.
Yeah, well, thank you, Duke. And so we did get an email from a whistleblowing parent of a first grade student at this school, and we got pictures of all the worksheets they were assigned. And basically, they have these kids learning about Ramadan. They have them painting prayer rugs. They have them studying Arabic calligraphy, explaining that Allah is the most merciful and the most gracious. And so this parent asked his child, did you learn anything about Jesus? Like, oh yeah, we learned that Muslims pray to Jesus on these rugs. But did you learn anything about Christmas? Oh no, nothing about Christmas. So very, very troubling for this parent. He described himself as a horrified parent and a sad parent. Obviously, we don't want to reveal his identity for his protection and the protection of his child, but very troubling, Duke.
And this is, of course, being replicated in public school classrooms all across the country under the guise of religious history. Isn't it funny that we got rid of Christianity, right? In the public schools, we've got rid of prayer. To teach about Christ or Christianity or to teach any of the spiritual or religious aspects of Christmas is a violation of the First Amendment, violation of separation of church and state, right? However, when it comes to being able to teach religions like Islam, we've got these world religion classes that have been added to social studies programs all across the country. And they don't teach Judaism, and they don't teach Christianity, but they're sure very interested in not just teaching the historical and cultural aspects of Islam, because if they did teach the historical aspects of Islam, they'd be focusing a lot on colonialism and war and violence and oppression. They don't do that. When they teach Islam under the guise of religious education, world religion education, history, all of a sudden they become very spiritual. These kids are being asked to recite Muslim prayers, to talk about spirituality with regards to Islam. How are they getting away with this?
Yeah, it does seem, and we've been tracking this trend for a long time now at Freedom Project Media, on the Newman Report blog. It seems like all other religions, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, all the pagan Native American traditions, Wicca, all of these are welcome in the public school system. The only ones that are not welcome are Christianity and Judaism, as you mentioned. So no Ten Commandments, no Lord's Prayer, no Bible, except to demonize those things. And of course, we know the reigning religion of the public school system, as mandated by the Supreme Court in the early 60s, was the religious humanism of John Dewey. So, it's really troubling what's happening here. It's mostly Christians who pay the taxes for these public schools, and yet Christianity is not allowed, and all the other religions are being promoted. It's a really, really serious situation, Duke. And it's not an isolated case here or there. It's a national thing that's happening, very deliberate, very engineered. And actually here in Spain, we're at the UN Climate Summit, you can see the results of it, right? You've got all these young Western kids out there doing Eastern mystic rituals and religious things, and dressing up as Native Americans and saving Mother Earth and paganism. It's having a serious effect, and I think ultimately it's going to fundamentally transform what's left of Western Christian civilization.
Yeah, and what's really galling about it from a separation of church and state perspective, which the left seems to pretend to be big on, is that they're doing it right around the Ramadan holiday, right? So they're not doing it in March. They're doing it right about the time Ramadan's being celebrated, and they're doing it at a holiday season, right? So the Christmas season rolls around in Western culture. Let's talk about Islamic religion. Let's talk about their rituals. Let's talk about their prayers, their spirituality. However, we won't talk about Christmas, particularly at the Christmas holiday. It's really an odd thing.
It is, and they're also, I think, being very deceptive here, because if you're going to teach the kids about Allah, if you're going to teach them that Muslims have a version of Jesus, I think we need to be clear about it. Apparently they did not teach these children that the Islamic Jesus plans to eventually return and slaughter all the Christians and Jews one day. And you would think if the kids are going to be learning about Islam and the Islamic Jesus, it might be important to explain to the kids, yeah, but it's different than the Jesus that's described in the Bible. I mean, if we're going to be fair and we're going to be having a legitimate educational experience here, we need to tell the kids the full truth. But they're not doing that. Instead, they're telling them that Allah is the most gracious and the most merciful. I think something's really wrong with that. And this parent was very, very upset about it. And I'm sure other parents who came across this were as well. But again, it's a national pattern. And unless and until parents do something about it, it's going to keep getting worse.
Well, it's a 2-for-1 for the Islamic apologizers, right? Not only do you promote Islamic spirituality and history, you're also taking a shot at traditional Christianity. So it's a 2-for-1. Now, then, these are charter schools. We want to make that clear. And it does mean that parents can choose the charter schools. No one forces these kids to go to charter schools. Money is diverted away from the public school system to pay for these charters, taxpayer money, so it's still a problem, and they are still considered public school. But you mentioned something interesting. As charter schools, this is another reason to be very careful about charter schools, moms and dads. There's a particularly virulent Islamic cleric who has responsible for maybe over 100 of these charter schools. His name is Gulen, right? And he promotes Islam and radical Islam through the charter school system. Talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, and actually, Fethullah Gulen, he's, as you mentioned, an Islamic cleric from Turkey. The Turkish government is not very fond of him, we can say. But he operates what is said to be the largest charter school network in the United States. And he's got this international movement, the Gulenist movement, got a lot of money, a lot of influence. And there are reports from all over the country that these charter schools are actually bringing in Islamic Turkish teachers from Turkey and getting them to present Islam in a positive light and denigrate Christianity in these schools. And again, they're funded by taxpayer dollars. So, while all these charter schools are very, very strictly limited, they're not allowed to say Christian prayers, they're not allowed to teach the Bible because they're getting public dollars, and yet you have these Islamic-controlled charter schools. We don't know whether the one in Aurora is or is not. We didn't get all the details because the parent wanted to remain anonymous. But this huge network of charter schools across America being funded by taxpayer dollars is peddling Islam to the children, and they're doing it with the money primarily from Christian taxpayers.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, to wind this down, Kanye West, newly Christianized, went into the American prison system and tried to do some good. And the American left screamed and howled about this was a separation of church and state. We can't have Christianity in the prisons, let alone the schools. Meanwhile, you've got a huge Islamic outreach in the federal prisons, and you've got now a huge infiltration of the American public school system by Islamic religion. I'm not talking about history and culture, Islamic religious ideas. And the same radical left that condemns Christianity has nothing to say about this. You're right, it's orchestrated, Alex, and it's not going to end well. And you look at the second story here. More than 1 in 3 millennials in the workplace, over 35%, said that Secret Santa celebrations, where you set a limit of like $20 and everybody has to pick one name out of a hat, and you buy somebody a gift and somebody gives you a gift, that Secret Santa community building at work, this holiday tradition of exchanging gifts at the office, should be banned because it causes anxiety, according to a recent study of the British online job board called JobSite. So many of these surveys come from England. And in England, to the surprise of nobody, we find that these kids are terribly stressed out about having to buy a present, too much pressure, can't afford it. And the irony of the story is they would be all for Secret Santa if the companies paid for them. If the companies they work for funded them, set aside a big pool of money in which these presents were paid for by somebody, not you, that's the spirit of millennial Christmas, right? Give, 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 as long as someone else is paying for it. Interesting, 67% of millennials surveyed in this program from JobSite, they agree that gift giving is good for morale. But 27% said that their employers should foot the bill. 1 in 5, 20% of workers believe that such events should not be celebrated in the workplace at all. And 35% of millennials would even like to see them banned, said JobSite. A significant portion of young people, of young workers, feel like the business should shoulder the burden rather than adding to the pressures of individual employees, the report added. Millennials in employment particularly agree, with 24% asking for dedicated company budgets to avoid having to chip in themselves. And of course, what we see about this is two particular angles. One, everything stresses out a millennial. The fact that you have to, how do these kids do their jobs? How do they meet deadlines at work? Given their low levels of literacy, how do they write reports? How do these kids put up with yearly reviews? How do these kids deal with the pressure of working in an environment that expects something from you? It's clear that the schools these kids went to don't expect anything from them in terms of hard work, labor, or accountability. How in the world, if something like Secret Santa stresses them out to the point that they want it banned, banned, from every aspect of the workplace, these kinds of celebrations, these kinds of harmless little gift exchanges, they can't handle that. I don't understand how they're doing their work. Maybe that's why countries like France have passed laws to make it almost impossible to fire the younger generations, however poorly prepared they are. In France, if you've got kids, young workers that you've hired, and they can't do the job, won't do the job, or incapable of doing the job, there is so much legislation that prohibits you from getting rid of them. Guaranteed jobs to ignoramuses for the rest of their life. This is a big problem. And the second angle about this, besides the inability to be responsible, is the moral angle of this, right? That gift giving is fine. Notice this. As long as the company, the government, the superstructure, as long as your employer pays to give gifts, your gift to somebody else, you're all for it. But the minute you have to shoulder any personal responsibility, this now becomes a huge, huge struggle and a burden. We want all the generosity of Christmas, but none of the responsibility of individual giving. This seems to me to be exactly what you get when you deconstruct traditional Christian values and you replace them with quasi-socialist nonsense. Now you've got a Detroit high school that graduated a minority student, a valedictorian, who now is at college at Michigan State University, and she is absolutely struggling to get by the lowest possible levels of math. She wasn't prepared. She says herself in the story that she received all A's, right? And now that she's actually at a university, she's incredibly, has to be remediated here. So as colleges move to do away with the SATs, of course, any exams that measure what high school kids know are now going away. And they're going away because it's too much pressure, it's too much stress, and the exams, like the SATs and the ACTs, they discriminate because they don't get everybody the same grades. Everybody doesn't get the same scores. And so the exams now are not inclusive. The only way you can include everybody in college, including, like in Detroit, people who can't even read and do math at a high school level, let alone a college level, the only way you can include them is not to have any entrance standards. By that argument, shouldn't you get rid of the valedictorian name, though, too? If we can't have the ACTs and the SATs because they are exclusive, isn't a valedictorian exclusive? And what does it mean that you have a valedictorian at a Detroit high school who can barely do ninth grade math? The whole system is screwy. The valedictorian of this Detroit high school is reportedly struggling with basic math in college. The development comes as colleges have increasingly rejected objective admissions criteria in the name of equity and inclusion. Markel McClendon is her name. She struggled in low-level math classes she's taking during her first semester at Michigan State University. Clendon, the valedictorian of her graduating class at Detroit's Cody High School, was used to getting all A's, but found herself asking strangers to help her with her college math homework. Michigan State University has pushed for admitting more racial minorities in the name of diversity. That's right. Bring these kids to college, regardless of whether they can do the work or not, and then once you admit them, like this child, you can't fail them. To fail them is racist, right? You bring these kids who are not prepared. The public schools have let them down. The American public school system has kept them utterly ignorant, but still handed out awards like graduation diplomas and valedictory addresses to these kids who know nothing. Michigan State has been lobbying to bring more of these kids to campus. And then lo and behold, when the kids get to campus, they can't do the work. And so what Michigan State does is lower standards for everybody across the board. Yep, Michigan State, like many universities, has pushed for admitting more racial minorities, not in the name of academic achievement, but to make the campus look more diverse. Quote, its incoming freshman class is predicted to be the largest and most diverse in the school's history, with more than 8,400 anticipated students. And what percentage of those 8,400, like Markel, aren't ready for this? They're being used by the school for diversity photo ops. You're destroying academic achievement and what universities are supposed to teach kids. You're destroying that in the name of photo ops. So you can Michigan State can pass out their glossy manuals and handbooks, and you'll see all these minority kids on the pages, right? In fact, you'll see almost no white kids. It'll be all minority kids. That's how you advertise, right? And what's the cost of this? Markel, right? Who can barely do basic 9th and 8th grade math. And she's very ambitious, good for her, and I hope she gets where she wants to go. But the problem is that they're having to remake college to adjust down to her, not to raise her up. In 2016, Michigan State University removed the requirement that all students take at least algebra in either college or high school, right? They've gotten rid of it. So usually we teach algebra in 8th or 9th grade. Now, to get into Michigan State, you can take it in college, but they've waived the college requirement. So you literally can get into Michigan State and never having had a class in algebra. And are we surprised that the valedictorian here, Markel, is absolutely struggling with her basic math? So 2016, MSU removes the requirement to take algebra in either college or high school. Algebra is taught in 8th grade in many schools. Meanwhile, Wayne State University near Detroit, which is a very expensive private school, dropped its general education math requirement altogether. If you were Markel and you had gone to Wayne State, you wouldn't have had to take a math class at all as part of your gen ed. McClendon, the valedictorian, who could not be reached for comment, maybe she couldn't figure out how to answer the phone, said she is majoring in biomedical laboratory science, which requires her to pass classes such as calculus, organic chemistry, and advanced clinical chemistry. Again, I don't blame the student here, but you've set this child up to fail, and the only way she won't fail is what happened in high school. You pass her even if she knows nothing at the college level. And that'll do. I want to call your attention to what we're going to be doing next week on the Dr. Duke Show. Next week, we're going to give you 4 30-minute episodes on our lecture series. Some of you will recall we've done some really wonderful lecture series in the past on everything from Shakespeare to the history of universities to the Peanuts gang and their influence on American culture. Well, we're doing a lecture series next week. We're going to give you a really in-depth look at the history of socialism and the history of socialism as it applies directly to American public schools. If you want to know why American schools have lost their way, they've given up on actually teaching subject matter, and they're teaching all ideology and politics, this is the lecture series that will explain it all to you. It's called The Socialist Destruction of Education, and we're going to take a look at this. So please join us next week for this 4-part series starting on Monday, half hour each day for 4 days, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'd like to thank My Patriot Supply for sponsoring today's show. If you have a business, large or small, we'd love to partner with you. Visit freedomproject.com/advertise to get started. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.